dictionary has stated the word verb means a word indicating action, occurrence, or being, while verbal means spoken or in words. As for communication, the word itself meaning something that communicates information, a letter or message. Verbal communication is a two-way process where the information or the message is transferred from a speaker or writer to a recipient. Different from non-verbal communication, this type of communication is focused on the words and the message sent between both parts, then their gestures, body language, face expressions, and so on. Usually, these two major signal systems, the verbal and non-verbal behaviors, reinforce or support each other. For example, you does not express anger while there is a smile on your face. And when your body is relaxed, it's not a sign of fear when you said you were afraid at that time. To express the feelings and the thoughts exactly same as what a sender wants a reader or a listener understands the way they want, the verbal and non-verbal system must be working together to make it more sense and acceptable. This is why for message to seem more livable and functional, emoticons like smiley, kiss, and happy were created to compensate for this lack of facial expressions and gestures during typing conversation or computer communication. As for this research, we will be discussing more and introduce the concept of verbal communication, and to elaborate this topic, we will focus on the types and principles of the verbal messages, the ways people can use it most effectively, and the perspective of Islam about this communication and what the Western approach about it.
My name is Nur Atria binti Saimi. My matric number 1202770. Verbal communication refers to the use of words in delivering the desired message. Verbal communication is divided into written communication and oral communication. Written communication involves any sort of conversation that uses the written word. For example, type electronic documents, emails, and text chat. The effectiveness of this communication is based on writing style, grammar, and vocabulary. Oral communication is an informal conversation. As an example, voice chat. The effectiveness of oral communication depends on the clarity of speech, voice modulation, pitch, and loudness. There are 4 types of verbal communication. The first one is intrapersonal communication. The second one is interpersonal communication. The third one is small group communication. And the last one is public communication. Intrapersonal communication means communicate, write, or think to oneself, like self-talk. This communication is important in developing emotions.
Interpersonal communication
is between 2 or more people exchanging feelings, thoughts, and ideas in face-to-face context. This communication includes face expression and body language, while small group communication is an interaction involving 3 or more persons who are linked by a common aim. This communication is the process of exchanging information among members to guarantee the organization's interdependent goals are met. The last one is public communication. Public communication is when a person stands in front of the audience and deliver message to a specific audience. As an example, like press conference and seminars. There are new forms of public communication like newspaper editorials and billboard. And as for mass media like magazine and radio. Public speaking also included in public communication.
My name is Ainur Nadilah binti Rosmaliazi, matric number 1200330. Principles of verbal communications. First, language has rules. Second, language is arbitrary and symbolic. And lastly, language organizes and classifies. Language has rule. Language is a set of symbols, letters, or words with arbitrary meanings that are organized according to syntax rules and used to communicate. There are 3 types of rules that govern or control your use of words. First, syntactic rules. In linguistics, syntax refers to the rules that govern the ways in which words combine to form phrases, clauses, and sentences. In sentences and clauses, English parts of speech frequently follow ordering patterns such as compound sentences being joined by conjunction and by or multiple adjective modifying the same noun following a specific order based on their class, such as number, size, color, as in 4 small red chairs. Next, semantic rules. This is the most important rule in language to govern the meaning of words of how to interpret them. It considers what words mean or are meant to mean rather than their sound, spelling, grammatical function, and other factors. Last but not least, pragmatic rules. The meaning of something contextual is determined by its setting or context. For example, people get it if you tap someone on the shoulder and yell, "You are it," in a game of tag. But if you are in the grocery store, tapping strangers on the shoulder and yelling at them, "You are it," that is less contextual. Language is arbitrary and symbolic. Language is a system of symbols. A symbol is any object or item that can be used to represent something other than itself. Roses and chocolates represent love and affection. A police officer's badge represents his legal authority. The Malaysian flag represents Malaysia, and a judgment ring indicates betrothal, or a brand handbag like Gucci or Coach suggests prestige. These symbols have been used so frequently that their meanings have become standardized and are widely understood by all of us. Symbols can have two types of meanings, denotative and connotative. Denotative is the meaning of an symbol that is shared by a group of people. If you say the word cat or dog or elephant, the majority of English speakers will point the same animal. The connotative meaning is frequently found in the community of users rather than in dictionaries. For example, blue is a color, but it is also a word used to describe a feeling of sadness, as in, she is feeling blue. Language organizes and classifies reality. Language is used to create and express a sense of order in our world. We frequently group words that represent concepts based on their physical proximity or similarity. If a boy came to mind in the case of the word blue, but a female came to mind in reference to pink or red, then your habits of mind include a gender bias. We all use classification systems to help us navigate the world. Consider how perplexing life will be if we didn't have categories like male or female, young or old, tall or short, blue or pink. These categories only become difficult when we use them to maintain outdated biases and assumptions.
My name is Nofara Kisina binti Omar Manya, metric number 1200329. I want to present about using verbal communication effectively. In this type of communication, two misunderstandings or conflict of broken communication appear between the parties or for individuals. Verbal communication in the act of sharing information between individuals using speech. First, using verbal communication in extensionalized. This is to avoid intentional orientation. Extensional orientation is a tendency to look first at the actual people, objects, and events, and then at the label. Other than that, a tendency to be guided by what you see happening rather than by the way something is talked about or labeled. Language is relatively static. That discrimination is the ability to discriminate between individuals, objects, or events that seem to be similar but not identical in using verbal communication. Even while both could be covered by the same label, the index is a mental subscript grid that defines everyone as an individual. After that, intentional orientation language is ambiguous. Thus, words can have numerous meanings, and the message receiver must choose a meaning for the message. A model developed to better understanding how people interpret communication differently. The Ortkin and Richards triangles of meaning is the name of the model. It is human nature to focus on the actual people, objects, and events before understanding the labels. A proclivity to be directed by what you see rather than how anything or someone is described or labeled. The way you feel about the object or the significance you attach to it is the object that the task is about.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Al-Arina binti Muhammad Ilham, and my point today is the verbal communication in Islam and Western perspective. Okay, verbal communication in Islam and Western perspective are vastly different. As part of Islam's principles, ways, and justification, verbal communication should be based on Wahyu and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam hadith. The Western perspective, on the other hand, is solely concerned with the model of communication. In the perspective of Islam, verbal communication is viewed as important because human beings are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, Islam presents a model of verbal communication that makes every communicator aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence as the sole creator of the world, and realize of the social function of verbal communication at large, known as an ummah. Allah mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 83 in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإذ أخذنا ميثاقكم لا تسفكون دماءكم ولا تخرجون أنفسكم من دياركم ثم أقررتم وأنتم تشهدون, which means, and when we made a covenant with the children of Israel, you shall not serve any but Allah, and you shall do good to your parents and to the near of kind, and to the orphans and the needy, and you shall speak to men good words, and keep up prayer and pay the poor rent. Then you turn back except a few of you, and now too you turn aside. Okay, from this ayat, we understand that a critical component of verbal communication is akhlaq, or ethics, that is conspicuously absent from any Western communication model, and the Islamic very highlighted that akhlaq. While in the Western perspective, verbal communication refers to the use of words to deliver a message. It is about the language, both written and spoken, that separates human from other non-human creatures. The purpose of language, according to Pickering and Garrett in 2004, is to transmit intention and coordinate behaviors between people. Westerners are straightforward communicators who tend to deliver their entire message orally, ignoring body language and expecting the people to get to the point on what they meant. This isn't to say that Westerners aren't cultures, but it does mean that they may overlook nonsense like an understatement in speech and or certain sorts of humor such as a subtle sarcasm or sarcastic statements that doesn't put manners on the first place. That's all from me, Nur Arina binti Muhammad Ilham. Thank you for hearing.
Verbal communication is focused on what words the sender used in delivering his message to the recipient during his writing or speech, while on the other hand, non-verbal communication is about how their body language and gestures express their feelings and thoughts at that time. Thus, it requires both of these two systems to cooperate in making the recipient get the same meaning and understand what the sender is going to talk about. Interpersonal and intrapersonal communication are two types of verbal communication, and the biggest difference between these two is interpersonal requires two or more people in communicating or discussing a topic, while intrapersonal is between him and himself only, as it can be called as self-talk. Besides these two types of communication, there is also a small group and public communication was defined and included into this category. Principles of the system stated that the language has rules, it is arbitrary and symbolic, and the language itself classifies and organizes reality. To make this major signal system more effective, the communication must be clear, concise, and relevant. The phrases and tone that were formed must be tactful. In the perspective of Islam, this communication is seen as fundamental, while in the Western, it refers to the use of words during the conversation. It is mean the perspective in Islam and Western are not equally same between one another.